Right now, while you're watching this video, thousands of American families are making impossible choices between paying for electricity or buying groceries. Economic advisors and policymakers point to this modest increase as evidence that American families should be feeling relief. But there's a fundamental flaw in this narrative. However, these individual family adaptations have significant limitations. Personal financial adjustments cannot fully compensate for systemic economic pressures, and they cannot replace the fundamental stability that comes from adequate wages, affordable housing, and reasonable utility costs. What these adaptations can provide is temporary resilience, enough financial flexibility to survive short-term economic shocks while the broader American economy works toward finding a sustainable balance. As more American families adopt these survival-focused financial strategies, it becomes clear that the fundamental challenge extends beyond simple affordability issues. Families are learning to navigate an economic landscape where basic financial security principles are being completely redefined. The most important conclusion from this comprehensive analysis is clear. What American families are experiencing represents much more than a temporary economic adjustment or normal business cycle fluctuation. This is a fundamental transformation of the American economic system and the cost structure of basic living. When you step back and examine all the evidence together, an unmistakable pattern emerges. The American cost of living crisis is not the result of any single economic factor, but rather the combined effect of skyrocketing utility costs, record-breaking household debt levels, and wages that cannot keep pace with essential expense increases. These converging pressures have fundamentally altered daily life for American families, pushing unprecedented numbers into financial insecurity and creating early warning signs of economic crisis long before they appear in official government reports. Basic housing has become financially out of reach. Building savings has become increasingly difficult. Even managing the most essential monthly bills has become a significant financial challenge. This is the daily reality that millions of American families must navigate every month, representing the true human cost of a cost of living crisis that shows no signs of improving. That 3% represents a weighted average across all consumer goods and services. When you separate out the essentials that families cannot live without, the real inflation rate tells a completely different story. The critical question facing every American household is no longer whether this economic transformation will affect their family, but rather how quickly they can adapt to a new financial reality where traditional approaches to building economic security no longer produce reliable results. Families who recognize these fundamental changes and proactively adjust their financial strategies will have the best chance of maintaining stability during this unprecedented economic transition. Families who continue to rely on outdated financial assumptions and strategies may find themselves increasingly vulnerable to economic shocks that they never saw coming. Before you assume that your family's current financial situation provides adequate security, carefully evaluate whether the long-term economic trends we have documented align with your personal financial reality and preparedness. The early warning signs of this crisis are already clearly visible for families who know what to look for. Next week, we will examine the 3 specific sectors of the American economy that are showing the most serious signs of systemic breakdown, and we will reveal the exact protective strategies that top financial professionals are quietly implementing for their wealthiest clients to safeguard against what could become the most severe economic disruption in modern American history. If tonight's comprehensive analysis helped you understand the true scope and severity of what is happening to American families right now, make sure you are fully prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. Food prices surged well beyond 3% during this period. Energy costs maintained their upward trajectory. Essential services, from medical care to basic home maintenance, became significantly more expensive, not more affordable. This creates what economists term a measurement disconnect. Official numbers suggest improvement, while real household expenses continue their relentless climb. Here's the breakthrough insight that explains why families feel like they're drowning financially despite good economic news. When parents say their grocery budget has increased 20%, they're not imagining things. They're documenting the compounded effect of 36 months of consecutive price increases. Each time dairy products cost a little more, each time fresh vegetables require a bigger budget, each time basic household items inch upward, it creates an economic pressure cooker where family income loses purchasing power while financial breathing room evaporates completely. But here's the development that will leave you stunned. This same destructive pattern has taken hold in utility markets, but the scale is beyond anything families anticipated. Keep watching, because what we're about to reveal shows how the basic services that keep your home functioning have become the biggest threat to your family's financial survival. Of all the financial pressures crushing American households today, utility expenses have emerged as the most unexpected and devastating budget destroyer. Electricity, water, natural gas, waste management, and basic energy services that were once predictable and manageable now consume household income like major loan obligations. This isn't speculation or fear-mongering. This is documented reality backed by hard data showing that millions of American households are experiencing the most devastating economic upheaval since the Great Depression. According to comprehensive research that major news networks have failed to adequately report, more than 14 million American households entered 2025 carrying utility debt large enough to trigger service shutoffs. The average debt burden reached nearly $790 per household. This represents a crisis level that financial experts considered impossible just 1 decade ago. This crisis goes far beyond simple rate increases. We're witnessing essential services systematically destroying family financial stability. Electricity rates alone have accelerated past general inflation rates for years running, driven by massive grid modernization projects, volatile fuel markets, extreme weather events, and utility company rate restructuring that compounds faster than typical families can adjust. Municipal water departments across the nation have implemented fee increases to fund crumbling infrastructure repairs, creating monthly bills that rival car payments instead of resembling basic utility costs. Right now, as we promised at the beginning, here are the 3 critical warning signs that indicate whether your household is vulnerable to this escalating financial crisis. Warning sign number 1. Your combined utility expenses now represent more than 15% of your monthly after-tax income. This percentage was traditionally the danger threshold for total housing costs. Today, it applies to utilities alone. If your monthly spending on electricity, water, gas, and basic services exceeds $400, you have crossed into financial danger territory. Warning sign number 2. You have shifted from paying all monthly bills automatically to strategically choosing which bills get priority each month. When households begin calculating which essential service can be delayed without immediate consequences, financial crisis management has replaced normal budgeting. Warning sign number 3. Your household savings rate has reached 0 or turned negative, even though your income has remained stable or increased compared to previous years. When escalating living costs completely absorb income improvements, it creates a financial vulnerability that most families fail to recognize before it becomes critical. The proof isn't hidden in complex financial reports or government statistics. It's sitting in your mailbox right now in the form of utility bills that look like mortgage payments and grocery receipts that drain entire paychecks. If these warning signs describe your current situation, you are directly experiencing what millions of Americans are confronting at this moment. But utility costs represent only the first wave of this crisis. The housing market collapse currently unfolding presents an even more fundamental threat to American family financial security. Growing numbers of Americans report receiving utility shutoff notices or negotiating extended payment arrangements just to maintain basic home services. These situations are not anomalies. When millions of families simultaneously cannot afford essential utilities, it signals complete system breakdown between American wages and basic living costs. Housing markets are telling an even more alarming story. Over the past 4 years, typical home prices have jumped approximately 40% across the United States. During the same period, mortgage interest rates have climbed to heights not seen in over 20 years. This dual impact of higher purchase prices and elevated borrowing costs has created a situation where the monthly payment for a typical American home now requires almost double the household income needed just 4 years ago. To put this in perspective, a family that could comfortably purchase a $350,000 home in 2021 would need to earn significantly more income today to afford exactly the same property. But the crisis extends well beyond homeownership affordability. The rental housing market, historically the fallback option for families priced out of buying, has undergone its own complete affordability meltdown. Rental prices have outpaced wage increases in nearly every major city and suburban area. Current research indicates that approximately 40% of American renters now dedicate over 30% of their total income exclusively to rent payments. This 30% threshold, known as the Housing Affordability Standard, was established as the boundary between housing security and housing stress. When 40% of renters exceed this limit, it indicates that the entire housing system is operating in crisis mode. These housing pressures create ripple effects throughout every aspect of family financial planning. Across every state in America, working families who thought they were financially secure have watched their monthly expenses transform from manageable to impossible, forcing them to choose which basic necessities they can actually afford. Families who should be building emergency funds or investing in education and retirement planning instead find themselves allocating ever larger portions of their income just to secure basic shelter. Many families have been forced into difficult compromises, accepting much longer commutes to access affordable housing, moving in with extended family members, or postponing major life milestones like marriage or children. What makes this housing affordability crisis particularly troubling is its impact on families who followed all the conventional financial advice. These are not households that made risky financial decisions or lived beyond their means. These are people who diligently saved for down payments, maintained excellent credit histories, and secured stable employment. Yet they find themselves completely priced out of housing markets they could easily access just a few years ago. This represents a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between responsible financial behavior and economic security in America. When established pathways to financial stability no longer produce expected results, it forces millions of families to completely rethink everything they believed about building long-term economic security. However, escalating housing costs represent just one component of a much more comprehensive transformation, reshaping American household economics. The household debt explosion, happening largely out of public view, may constitute the most dangerous long-term threat to American family financial survival. Stay with us as we expose how debt has become the invisible lifeline supporting millions of families, and why this lifeline is showing critical signs of failure. While housing and utility costs attack family budgets from multiple directions, American households are relying on debt in historically unprecedented ways to bridge the widening gap between earnings and living expenses. Here's what makes this crisis unprecedented. It's not affecting the unemployed or financially reckless. It's devastating families who saved responsibly, worked steadily, and made every smart financial decision they were told to make. The financial data tells a disturbing story that most mainstream financial commentary is completely ignoring. Home mortgage debt has reached all-time record levels, driven not only by higher property values, but also by buyers financing larger percentages of purchase prices and extending repayment terms to make monthly payments manageable. Consumer credit card debt has exploded to levels never before recorded, with typical American households carrying outstanding balances that previous generations would have considered financially catastrophic. Student loan payment problems are resurging after years of pandemic relief programs, as borrowers discover that any financial progress they made during the payment pause has been completely wiped out by dramatic increases in other essential living costs. What alarms financial researchers most is the fundamental change in how American families are using debt compared to historical patterns. In previous decades, households primarily borrowed money to purchase appreciating assets, fund educational advancement, or launch business enterprises. Today, rapidly increasing numbers of families describe using credit cards, personal loans, and even home equity borrowing to cover routine monthly living expenses. This shift from investment debt to survival debt represents a fundamental alteration in how American families manage basic economic challenges. When borrowing becomes the primary strategy for managing normal living costs, it creates a destructive financial spiral. Monthly debt payments consume more income, which reduces money available for essential needs, which creates greater dependence on additional borrowing, which further increases required monthly payments. In the comprehensive analysis ahead, you'll see exactly why official economic reports are missing the real story, how essential services have become luxury expenses, and why six-figure households are living paycheck to paycheck. Breaking free from this destructive cycle becomes extremely difficult when family income remains stagnant, while essential living costs continue their relentless increase. The psychological toll of this debt burden reaches far beyond simple monthly financial stress. Chronic financial pressure affects family decision-making, relationship quality, physical health, and the ability to plan for the future. When families live with persistent awareness that they are always one unexpected expense away from financial disaster, it fundamentally changes how they approach career decisions, healthcare choices, and retirement planning. The current debt crisis is particularly dangerous when compared to previous economic downturns. Interest rates have climbed dramatically from historic lows, making new borrowing much more expensive and increasing the cost of servicing existing variable rate debt. Credit card interest rates have reached levels not seen in decades, which means families who depend on credit to manage budget shortfalls face rapidly growing interest charges that can quickly overwhelm their ability to repay. At the same time, lending institutions have begun implementing stricter approval standards, making it increasingly difficult for financially stressed households to access the credit they have become dependent upon. This creates a dangerous financial vice, where families face higher costs for existing debt while simultaneously losing access to new credit that might help them manage immediate cash flow problems. The economic implications extend far beyond individual household finances to affect the entire American economic system. Most importantly, at exactly the 5-minute point, we'll walk you through 3 critical warning indicators that determine whether your family is heading toward the same financial cliff that has already claimed 14 million American households who now face the constant threat of losing basic services. When millions of families are forced to dramatically reduce discretionary spending in order to service debt and cover essential expenses, it reduces consumer demand for goods and services across every sector of the economy. This broad reduction in consumer spending can trigger business revenue declines, employment layoffs, and additional downward pressure on household incomes. What we may be witnessing is the beginning of a deflationary economic spiral, where declining consumer spending creates slower economic growth, which creates additional financial pressure on American families. The wage stagnation problem that underlies this entire crisis deserves focused examination because it forms the economic foundation upon which all other financial pressures are built. Coming up next, we'll analyze why even families with substantial middle-class incomes are finding it impossible to maintain basic financial security. The American wage stagnation crisis is more severe and widespread than most people realize. While government employment statistics suggest a strong job market, the actual earning power and quality of American employment tells a dramatically different story. Inflation-adjusted wages for most American workers have remained essentially flat despite consistent reports of economic growth and record corporate profits. This means that even families with stable jobs and regular annual pay increases find themselves steadily losing ground against the rising cost of basic necessities. A representative middle-class American family might receive annual income increases of 2 or 3%, which seems reasonable until you realize that their essential living expenses, housing, utilities, food, transportation, healthcare are increasing at rates significantly higher than 3% per year. The result is a slow but steady decline in what families can actually afford, happening gradually enough that many families don't recognize the problem until they're forced to make painful choices about basic necessities. At this very moment, across every region of America, a silent economic disaster is accelerating. This erosion of purchasing power affects different groups of Americans in distinct ways, creating a complex web of financial stress that spans every demographic category. Senior Americans living on fixed retirement incomes face especially severe financial pressures. Social Security benefit adjustments and pension payment increases typically lag significantly behind actual cost increases, transforming what should be a financially secure life stage into an ongoing struggle to balance competing essential needs. Fixed incomes that previously covered housing, prescription medications, utilities, and food now prove inadequate, forcing seniors to make difficult trade-offs between basic necessities. Many seniors have begun skipping doctor appointments or rationing prescription medications simply to stay within their limited budget constraints. Working families with children experience equally intense financial pressure, but manifested through different daily struggles. Parents who previously managed household expenses with reasonable confidence now find themselves carefully evaluating every purchase decision, postponing necessary car repairs, or eliminating family activities to preserve financial stability. Increasing numbers of working parents report receiving past due notices or warnings from service providers, not because of irresponsible financial management, but because their steady income simply cannot cover basic living expenses without accumulating debt. Young adults and new families face a version of economic reality that differs dramatically from what previous generations experienced. Many are indefinitely postponing traditional milestones like homeownership, marriage, or parenthood, not due to changing preferences, but because the financial requirements for these life stages have become unattainable on current incomes. Their life planning has been forced into short-term survival mode, where thinking beyond the current month becomes an impossible luxury. For 3 straight years, government officials and media outlets have insisted that inflation was under control, declining, returning to normal levels. Official government data shows the Consumer Price Index rising just 3% in 2025. These individual family struggles may not register in official economic surveys, but they reveal economic realities that aggregate statistics cannot capture. The daily stress of living in an economy where financial choices feel increasingly constrained. The data documents the pressure. The human experiences demonstrate its real-world impact. Together, they reveal how dramatically the current economic environment is reshaping the fundamental experience of American family life. In an economic environment where living costs escalate faster than family income and financial security feels increasingly elusive, millions of Americans are making adjustments driven by necessity rather than choice. This adaptation represents less of a strategic financial plan and more of an economic survival response. Families are fundamentally changing how they approach risk management, expense prioritization, and preparation for the financial volatility that has become normal American life. One of the most significant changes is the widespread return to self-sufficiency and do-it-yourself approaches. Services that families previously hired professionals to handle, home repairs, vehicle maintenance, basic household projects, are now being learned and managed internally to avoid the cost of professional services. Families are developing practical skills they never expected to need, purely to reduce monthly expenses. Many families have also begun systematically simplifying their lifestyles, canceling subscription services, eliminating non-essential purchases, and finding creative ways to stretch budgets for absolute necessities. Emergency savings, despite being more difficult to accumulate, has taken on critical importance in family financial planning. Households that manage to contribute even small amounts to emergency funds report feeling significantly more confident about handling unexpected financial challenges. Some Americans have also begun shifting toward investments and assets they perceive as more stable, not for wealth building or speculation, but simply as a way to protect their purchasing power from continued erosion.